She asked me if she was allowed to have a snack. She was 8 years old. She was sitting at my kitchen table. I had put out a plate of apple slices and peanut butter. Nothing fancy, just something I threw together while I figured out what to make for dinner. She looked at the plate for a long moment, then looked up at me and said very quietly, "Am I allowed to have one?" I almost didn't catch it. I was half turned toward the refrigerator. But something in her voice made me stop. "Of course you are, sweetheart," I said. "That's why I put it out." She nodded slowly and picked up one apple slice, holding it with both hands like it might be taken from her. She ate it in 3 careful bites. Then she folded her hands in her lap and looked at the plate again. "Can I have another one?" I told her she could have the whole plate. She stared at me like I'd said something in a foreign language. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. My name is not important. What matters is that I am 61 years old, retired from 30 years in county code enforcement, and I have one daughter, Patrice. Patrice has been married twice. The first time didn't take. The second time, she married a man named Cliff, and together they had a little girl named Lily, who's the reason I'm telling this story at all. Patrice and Cliff split up when Lily was 3. It wasn't a clean break. There were lawyers and a mediator and 6 months of everyone being very civil while being very furious underneath. In the end, they settled on joint custody. Lily spent the school year with Cliff, who had moved to a suburb about 2 hours north of me, and summers and holidays with Patrice. Cliff had remarried quickly, inside of a year, a woman named Sandra who had 2 kids of her own from a previous relationship. I want to be careful here because I don't have anything against someone finding happiness again after a hard divorce. People heal at different speeds, but I will say that from the moment Sandra entered the picture, my access to Lily started shrinking. Patrice's too. Phone calls that used to happen twice a week started happening once a week, then every other week. When Lily came for summer visits, she was quieter than I remembered, smaller, somehow, even as she was getting physically bigger. I told myself kids go through phases. I told myself the transition between 2 households is hard. I told myself a lot of things. Lily came to stay with me for 2 weeks that July because Patrice had a work trip she couldn't reschedule, a conference in Denver that had been planned for months. I had done this before, kept Lily for a week here or there, and I was looking forward to it. I'd planned things. The Natural History Museum, which she'd loved the last time. The farmer's market on Saturday mornings. Baking something together, because she used to like helping me measure flour. She arrived on a Friday evening. Cliff dropped her off, barely came inside, said he'd pick her up in 2 weeks, and left. Lily stood in my hallway with her backpack and a rolling suitcase and watched his car pull away. I hugged her. She hugged me back, but loosely, like she'd forgotten how. We had dinner, grilled chicken, corn on the cob, biscuits from a can because she used to love those. She ate the chicken, she left the corn. She took 1 biscuit, ate about half of it, and then set it down. "Not hungry?" I said. "I'm okay," she said. "I'm okay," she said. She said it the way adults say it when they don't want to talk about something. I didn't push. I showed her to the guest room. I put fresh sheets on and found an old stuffed elephant in the closet that had been hers since she was 4. And I said goodnight. I was up early the next morning, around 6. I made coffee and sat on the back porch for a while before going inside to start breakfast. I was going to make pancakes. When I opened the door to the guest room to let her know breakfast was almost ready, I found her already awake, sitting cross-legged on the bed. In front of her, spread out on the comforter, were 4 packets of crackers, 2 granola bars, and a small bag of trail mix. She looked up at me and immediately started gathering everything together, pulling it toward her like she was expecting me to take it. "Where'd you get all that?" I said. She hesitated. "I packed it. In my backpack." I looked at the pile. It wasn't the kind of thing a kid packs for a sleepover. It was the kind of thing a person packs when they're not sure food will be available. "Lily," I said, as calmly as I could, "you know you can eat anything in this house, anytime you want?" She nodded, but she didn't put the food away. I made pancakes. I put a big stack in front of her with butter and maple syrup and a glass of orange juice, and I sat across from her and drank my coffee and watched her eat. She ate 3 pancakes. Then she looked up. "Is there more?" "As many as you want," I said. Something crossed her face that I couldn't quite read. Not happiness, exactly. More like relief, But underneath the relief was something that looked almost like suspicion, like she was waiting for the condition attached. She had 2 more pancakes. After breakfast, while she was watching television in the living room, I went to her backpack. I know some people would say that's an invasion of privacy. She was 8 years old and something was wrong, and I needed to know what I was dealing with. The backpack had her clothes on top, neatly folded, which surprised me, more neatly than I would have expected from a child who packed her own bag. Underneath the clothes were more snacks, not just a few. 2 boxes of crackers, a bag of pretzels, peanut butter in one of those single-serve containers, 4 juice boxes, a Ziploc bag with what looked like leftover dinner rolls getting a little dry. I stood there in the kitchen for a long time. I spent that first weekend just watching, not interrogating her. I didn't want to frighten her or make her feel like she'd done something wrong. I fed her regularly and well, and I paid attention. By Sunday, I had noticed 4 things. First, she always finished everything on her plate, but she ate slowly and deliberately, like she was rationing even when there was no need to. Second, whenever I got up from the table during a meal, even just to refill my coffee, she glanced at her plate with a look I can only describe as protective. Third, she asked permission before taking anything from the kitchen, not just a formality. She genuinely waited for my answer before moving. Fourth, when I offered seconds, she always paused before accepting, like she needed to calculate whether it was safe to say yes. On Sunday evening, I asked her, very gently, what meal times were like at home. At her dad's house. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "We have a chart." "What kind of chart?" "For behavior," she said. "You get checks, and the checks decide what you get for dinner." I kept my voice very even. "Can you tell me more about that?" She explained it the way kids explain things that have become so normal they don't realize they're abnormal. There was a whiteboard in the kitchen. Every day started with 5 checks. You lost checks for things. Talking back, not finishing chores fast enough, getting a bad report from school, arguing with Sandra's kids. When dinner time came, your remaining checks determined what you ate. 5 checks meant a full meal. 3 or 4 checks meant a smaller portion. 2 checks meant a basic plate, a piece of bread, maybe some vegetables. 1 check or 0 checks meant nothing. "Nothing?" I said. "You could have water," she said. I had to take a breath. "How often did you get 0 or 1 check?" I asked. She thought about it. "A lot lately," she said. "Sandra says I have an attitude." She said it without emotion, the way she might report the weather. I called Patrice that night after Lily was in bed. I told her everything. There was a long silence on the other end. "I knew something was off," Patrice said. "I just didn't know what." "She's been packing food in her backpack," I said. "Like she's preparing for the food to run out." Another silence. "What do we do?" Patrice said. "First thing tomorrow," I said. "I'm calling an attorney. I have a friend, a retired sheriff's deputy named August, who I've known since our kids were in Little League together. I called him first thing Monday morning. August pointed me toward a family law attorney in the city named Patricia Chen, who took the call the same afternoon. I explained everything to Ms. Chen. The chart, the checks, the backpack full of food, the way Lily asked permission before eating. Mistress Chen. Chen listened without interrupting, and when I was done she said, "What you're describing is a documented form of child neglect. Using food access as a behavioral consequence is not legal discipline, it's deprivation." She told me to document everything. Write down the dates, the times, what Lily said and how she said it. Photograph the contents of the backpack. Keep a record of what Lily ate while in my care. How much, how often. She told me not to coach Lily or ask leading questions, but to let her talk freely and write down exactly what she said. She also told me something else. She said that when Lily went back to Cliff's at the end of 2 weeks, she might not be safe. And she said that the appropriate next step, given what I'd described, was to contact Child Protective Services. I had never called CPS in my life. I had never imagined doing it about my own granddaughter. I called them that afternoon. The CPS caseworker who came to my house was a woman named Gloria. She was matter-of-fact and thorough, and she was very good with Lily. Patient, unhurried, giving Lily space to talk. She interviewed Lily privately for about 45 minutes while I waited in the kitchen. When Gloria came out, she didn't say much. She said the interview had been productive. She said she'd be in touch. I found out later, through Ms. Eyre. Chen, who was communicating with the agency on our behalf, that Lily had described the chart system in detail, including specific instances of going without dinner. She had also mentioned that Sandra's children were not subject to the same system. Their checks reset differently, and they were rarely penalized the way Lily was. Ms. Chen filed an emergency motion to modify the custody arrangement while the CPS investigation was ongoing. The judge granted a temporary order. Lily would remain with me and then transition to Patrice while the investigation proceeded. When Cliff found out, he called me. I let it go to voicemail. His message was calm, which surprised me. He said there had been a misunderstanding. He said the chart was a positive behavioral tool recommended by a parenting book. He said Lily had a tendency to exaggerate. I saved the voicemail. Patrice flew back from Denver early. She came and got Lily after about 10 days, and the two of them moved into Patrice's apartment while everything was sorted out. I drove up to see them twice in the weeks that followed. Lily seemed lighter each time. Not fixed. Whatever that word even means for something like this, but lighter. She still asked permission before taking food from the kitchen. The first time it happened at Patrice's, Patrice looked at me over Lily's head and I watched my daughter work very hard to keep her face neutral. You never have to ask, baby, Patrice told her. Food is not a reward. It just is. You get to eat because you're a person. Lily nodded like she was filing that away for future reference. The CPS investigation took 9 weeks. In that time, they interviewed Cliff, Sandra, Sandra's 2 children, Lily's teacher, and the school counselor, who, it turned out, had noted concerns about Lily and her file going back almost a full school year. Lily had been coming to school with inadequate lunches, sometimes no lunch at all. The counselor had provided lunch from the school's emergency supply more than once. She had sent a note home. The note had apparently gone unanswered. There was also a financial piece that came out during the investigation, and this one made me angrier than almost anything else. Lily's maternal grandfather, Patrice's father, my ex-father-in-law, a man I'd always respected, had passed away 2 years earlier and left Lily a small trust. $15,000, meant for her education, set up through his estate. The trustee was supposed to be Patrice, but during the divorce proceedings, Cliff's attorney had negotiated joint trustee status for Cliff as well, framed as a good faith gesture of co-parenting cooperation. In the 20 months since the trust was established, Cliff had made 3 withdrawals totaling just over $6,000. The stated purpose on each withdrawal was educational expenses. The actual expenses, which Ms. Chen's investigator documented, included a new laptop for Sandra's daughter, registration fees for Sandra's son's travel soccer league, and several $100s at a home improvement store. $6,000. From a trust left to Lily by her grandfather. Spent on other people's children. When Miss Chen showed me the documentation, I sat with it for a while without saying anything. You'll have to pay it back, she said. With interest. The court will require an accounting and restitution. That's not really the point, I said. No, she said. It's not. The hearing was in October. I drove up the night before and stayed in a hotel near the courthouse. I hadn't slept well in weeks. Cliff was there with his attorney. Sandra was there too. Patrice sat on one side of the room with Ms. Chen. I sat in the gallery. The judge was a woman in her late 50s who had clearly heard a great deal of nonsense in her career and was not interested in hearing more. She went through the findings methodically. The CPS report, the school counselor's documentation, the trust account records, the testimony from the investigation. Cliff's attorney argued that the chart system was a legitimate parenting strategy. He produced a parenting book. He argued that Lily had misrepresented the severity of the consequences. He pointed out that Lily had no documented medical issues related to nutrition. The judge looked at him for a moment after he finished. Then she said that a child asking an adult, "Am I allowed to eat?" was not a sign of a healthy home environment, regardless of what any parenting book recommended. She said that food is not a privilege. It is a basic necessity, and withholding it from a child as punishment, regardless of degree or frequency, constituted neglect under state guidelines. She awarded primary custody to Patrice, with Cliff having supervised visitation every other weekend. She ordered Cliff to repay the full trust amount, plus interest, within 18 months. She ordered him to complete a parenting course. She referred the case to the district attorney's office for review, though she made no promises about where that would go. Cliff said something to his attorney in a low voice when the ruling was read. I couldn't hear what it was, I didn't need to. Lily is doing better. I want to be honest about what better means, because I don't think this is the kind of thing that goes away clean. She still has moments. She still sometimes eats quickly, like she's racing something invisible. She still occasionally asks permission for a snack, even in Patrice's kitchen. Even now, her pediatrician recommended a therapist who works specifically with children, and Lily has been seeing her twice a month. The therapist told Patrice that what Lily experienced was a form of emotional and physical neglect, and that recovery is real, but it takes time and consistency. Last Thanksgiving, Lily helped me make the mashed potatoes. It's the job I always give the youngest person in the room. You mash, I'll season, you mash some more. She stood at the counter with the hand masher and worked at it seriously, the way she does most things, and after a few minutes she said, without looking up, "Grandpa, can I have some while they're warm? Before dinner?" I got her a bowl right then, added a little extra butter. She sat on the kitchen stool and ate it while I finished making the rest of the meal, and she didn't ask if she was allowed to have more. She just had more. That was enough to make me step into the pantry for a minute on the pretense of getting something from the shelf so she wouldn't see my face. I am not a man who talks about his feelings easily. I spent 30 years in code enforcement, which is not a field that rewards emotional disclosure. I have been divorced. I have buried both my parents. I have made a lot of mistakes and tried to learn from most of them. I am not sentimental by nature, but I will say this. If you are reading this and something feels wrong, not dramatic, not obvious, not the kind of thing you see in a news story, just a small thing, a question a child asks, a look on a face, the way a kid flinches when you reach toward their plate, pay attention to it. I almost didn't. I almost told myself I was overreacting. I almost said it wasn't my place. Lily is 9 now. She has her whole life ahead of her, and she will figure out most of it on her own. But she needed someone to pay attention at the right moment, and I happened to be the one in the room. I don't say that to make myself sound like a hero. I say it because the bar was low and I almost didn't clear it. Pay attention. That's all. It doesn't take a hero. It takes someone who is willing to stop and ask what is actually happening in front of them. She asked me if she was allowed to have a snack. I'm glad I heard her. I've been thinking about cause and effect a lot since all of this happened. Not in any grand philosophical way. I'm a retired code enforcement officer from a mid-sized county in the Midwest, not a philosopher. But when you watch an 8-year-old ask permission to eat an apple slice and then you trace that behavior backward to where it started, you can't help but see the chain. Every link connected to the one before it, nothing random about any of it. Cliff made choices, small ones at first probably, a chart on a whiteboard that seemed, in his mind, like structure, a rule that seemed to him like discipline, and then another rule, and then a pattern, and then a little girl who packed granola bars in her backpack before visiting her grandfather because some part of her nervous system had learned that food was not guaranteed. That's not an accident. That's the accumulation of 100 small decisions made by an adult who stopped asking whether what he was doing was right and only asked whether it was working. I think about that a lot. How easy it is to confuse control with care. How a person can tell themselves they're teaching a child responsibility while they're actually teaching her fear. Cliff wasn't a monster in the movie sense. He was something more ordinary and in some ways more dangerous. A person who had convinced himself that what he was doing was reasonable, and surrounded himself with enough silence that no one pushed back until I happened to have 2 weeks with his daughter and a sharp enough eye to notice something was wrong. That's the tricky part about neglect that doesn't leave marks. It hides inside routines. It disguises itself as parenting. What I keep coming back to is Lily herself. She didn't fall apart. She adapted. She packed her own food. She learned to read a room, to figure out quickly whether a new adult was safe. She asked careful questions. She waited and watched before she trusted. Those aren't the instincts of a broken child. They're the instincts of a resilient one, a child who had figured out how to survive something she never should have had to survive. That kind of resilience doesn't come from nowhere. It's built, quietly, in the spaces between hard moments when a kid decides to keep going anyway. I don't take credit for her resilience. That was already in her. What I take responsibility for is paying attention at the right moment and not talking myself out of what I saw. That's the part I want to say plainly, because I almost got it wrong. There was a version of that first evening where I told myself she was just adjusting, where I chalked the backpack full of food up to a quirky kid habit, where I didn't ask the question that needed to be asked. That version of events had consequences too, just different ones I don't want to think about for very long. Doing the right thing, in my experience, is rarely dramatic. It's usually just the next obvious step that you have to decide not to avoid. Call the attorney. Call the caseworker. Write it down. Show up to the hearing. Let Lily eat as many pancakes as she wants and don't make a thing of it. She's 9 now and she's going to be okay. Not because anything was magically fixed, but because the people around her decided to be consistent and honest and present. That's all character really is in the end. Not a single heroic moment. Just a long string of ordinary ones where you choose to do the harder, more decent thing. I stepped into the pantry so she wouldn't see my face. I'm not ashamed of that. Some things deserve to be felt fully, away from the person you're trying to stay steady for.